It's the Redbird Reboot podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Redbird Reboot.
Welcome in, Arizona Cardinals fans, to the Redbird Reboot podcast. We've got Blake and Marcos here joining you today. You can make sure you're following us there on X and follow the Redbird Reboot podcast. Marcos, it is prime training camp time. We've already had one preseason game that no one cares about as the Hall of Fame game. We've got a preseason game coming up this week for Arizona. It's going to be a lot of fun as we start to break down just what these 2025 Cardinals look like. We'll get into all the different topics, who's been looking good, some of the injury questions, some incredible interceptions, and probably some of those guys who maybe are in danger of being cut from the roster that you wouldn't expect, and some who are going to make the roster that we may not expect. We're here to talk about all of that buzz. Before we get going, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, with the exception of the heat being so bad and so consistent and stuff. Everything's been good. My son went to school for for kindergarten, so it's his first day of school. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, back to school for those people who are in school. It's also similar with NFL players going back to basics, as it were, in training camp. We do have at least some interesting news as far as just coming out of what we've seen with Jonathan Gannon and some of the press conferences over the last couple of weeks. Some guys who are draft picks that are not necessarily round one draft picks, not necessarily round two guys, although we'll talk about one in particular. But we're talking a little bit at least about Jonathan Gannon talking about all of the three safety looks with getting Dadrian Taylor Demerson onto the roster. We're talking a little bit about some other guys who have stepped up. The biggest thing I think we want to open up with at least is some of the injuries that we've seen. So Starling Thomas, Arizona Cardinals, who was a starting cornerback last year, has a torn ACL. He is out for the season. We also have a couple of guys, mostly notably, I should say, the wide receivers. Michael Wilson has had a concussion. There was a run-in with Budda Baker that happened where Budda's knee went right into his helmet, at least, as he kind of dove for a ball on a deep pass. Budda's still been fine, but Michael Wilson's been out, did not participate in the red-white practice this past Saturday. Also had Marvin Harrison Jr. with his knee holding out for more precautionary reasons, missed a few days in a row. From what we know, it's not anything to be super concerned about. In fact, a lot of it is because Marv has been used so much so far in camp. What we've seen, at least as far as what we've heard, what we've been able to see is some incredible catches. We've seen him get utilized quite a bit more on slants, digs, quick outs. We've also seen him get a little bit more utilized out of the slot in some of the 7-on-7. We'll see how that turns out, as again, training camp and actual games are a bit different. But one thing that I was told was when they were doing the red zone drills at one point with 7-on-7, 11-on-11, just incredibly difficult to guard him. The quick twitch, being able to at least get some separation, as well as being able to use those big arms that he has had this year, whereas last year it wasn't that he was a slouch, but you can definitely tell, at least with, like we've talked about so far, one of the things he needed to do was to kind of keep the skinny legs down below and then be able to bulk up with the arms up top, because he was getting locked down a bit too often last year. Really, Marcos, this has been one of those cases where a lot of times you wonder and worry, is this going to be something that plays into the regular season? How has the Cardinals' depth been? The guy that we haven't talked about as much when it comes to guys like a Greg Dortch, even when it comes to a guy that we've talked about a lot as a potential deep threat, and that would be with the name of Xavier Weaver, I guess they call him Zave. We haven't talked as much about Zay Jones, but Zay Jones has had a great camp overall. He missed a lot of last season, was coming off of injury, picked it up late. He seems like he's got that wide receiver 3 spot on a lock as of right now, passing up the likes of a Greg Dortch. And it's something that probably, when we're talking about how the Cardinals offense plays out, you're going to be struggling if Marv misses time no matter what. That's the way it is. Michael Wilson has to stay healthy this year. It's a pivotal season for him. Zay Jones' development really helps as far as if the Cardinals are not able to run the ball effectively and are forced to spread it out. A lot of times teams, the best defenses will take away your top 2 threats. So that's where I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Cardinals' passing attack and how much Zay Jones actually gets used.
Yeah, sorry, I was about to start talking without unmuting myself. So, Zay Jones has been talked about at least by a couple of people that, hey, you know what, this could be the wide receiver 3. So we're seeing more utilization from someone like Zay Jones, and people are kind of talking him up. I think the reasoning behind that is because Zay Jones has been used quite heavily when it comes to, like, before, as a furthest inside threat, like the number 3 receiver and the number 2 receiver on trip sets. He's usually lined up at the number 3 spot, and, like, obviously in like doubles and whatnot, or 2 wide receiver uh, sets on one side of the formation. He'll be like the inside guy. So he's got some experience being able to run those skinny posts, and he's pretty good at being able to at least run those choice routes that you expect from someone who's a slot receiver and whatnot. He's not as good as Greg Dortch. He can't be as good as Greg Dortch on running those choice routes. Greg Dortch has better, his weight's more centered and whatnot, and it's lower to the ground. So obviously he's able to do that. Uh, One of the interesting things is that he is being utilized more than Greg Dortch, or at least has been shown that he's been utilized more than Greg Dortch, which is why a lot of people are starting to go on this whole, like, Zay Jones is number 3 receiver, and that's looking like that's exactly the way that this organization is heading to.
Yeah, it's something where when you talk about veteran receivers, guys who have produced, there's been production we've seen from Dortch, but Zay having the flexibility to be an inside and outside guy, I think that means a lot because it means you'll be able to rotate through some of your players. Also, when it comes to depth, we talked about should the Cardinals take a receiver. Some people had even argued Matthew Golden in the first round. Some people had argued, take a look at that second round receiver. Some even had wondered, hey, grab a Cam Scattaboo, use him as a receiver if you need to out of the backfield, being able to find ways to work him in so that you'll be able to have some of, keep Marv as the deep threat. Then you're able to stack stuff around using some of those skill sets. I think what we've seen is the Cardinals are in a spot where they have depth. If you're missing Marv, it's going to be not the end of the world because of one Trey McBride, who again has looked fantastic in this camp. We are going to at least also need to talk about the offensive line. Will Hernandez, he has been available as far as being able to be signed. He has kind of said that he's recovered. What we know, at least based off of him and the likes of a DJ Humphries, is you can play, but you may not necessarily be at full strength even through the entire season. What I think that we can at least look at is the play of Isaiah Adams has been good enough that if he was not up to par, we probably would have been able to at least see them reach out, sign Will Hernandez, kind of rested him through camp, and very much that sort of he's the starter. We still could see that signing. His number has not been taken. Usually teams, if they're ready to move on fully, that number will be given up. But what I think we can at least see with all of that is that Isaiah Adams has looked good enough. Jonathan Gannon's praised him. It seems like he's going to be getting the starting nod opposite of Evan Brown. And then we've also seen a couple of first-team reps from a guy like John Gaines II, with Gannon says he doesn't do veteran days off, but we've still kind of seen some of these veterans get some days off happening to work out with it. I think when it comes down to it, the biggest question fans have is the defensive line has looked so good in camp. There have been some times we've seen pressure, getting after the quarterback. I think that it's kind of causing people to reset. We forget that last year, this was one of the best run blocking lines in the NFL. It was solid in pass protection, if not spectacular. I'll add it with Paris Johnson. I think that at the end of the day, what we can at least say is that this defensive line is vastly improved, even guys like who we had questioned would make the roster for the most part have stood out pretty well. We've seen at least with Darius Robinson, he's been having a spectacular camp thus far. If he hits and Marv hits, that's going to be probably good enough for you to be back in playoff contention. Dante Stills has had a good camp, but there's one guy in particular, at least we can talk about. We'll talk about this rookie class with the defensive guys. And that's don't sleep on Elijah Simmons. He was a guy the Cardinals were looking at actually drafting. He has looked, maybe not dominant isn't the right word, but when you're talking about a guy who's an undrafted free agent, they have an uphill battle to get on the roster. They have a lot of things in the way, having to overcome draft picks, guys that you've actually invested into. He looks like he's a roster lock with how he's looked in camp. I've never say never, but even with the defensive depth, with his size and his quickness of just being able to get off of that pass rush ability to shed blocks, it looks like the Cardinals have found a late gem that they can rotate in, similar to Dante Stills. These are the sort of hits that you want to have, where you can get an undrafted free agent or two who can become an impact sort of player in a rotational aspect. That's the type of building block, Marcos, that good teams are able to find. It's something that the Cardinals really have not found very frequently. Um, it's something that I think you can look forward to as far as this defensive line taking another step forward.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that I really want to know where Elijah Simmons was supposed to be drafted in the draft. I believe he was supposed to be like a sixth round, maybe even kind of like borderline seventh round, and we were able to get him in free agency, which is something of note. I do remember watching the Bootleg podcast, and they didn't really talk about the UDFAs. They said, you know what, we'll be honest, we didn't even study any of them. So if he's not on that type of radar, what were the Cardinals like? Were the Cardinals just watching this guy like drop from the sixth to the seventh round, and in a UDFA they were like, this guy is ours? It'd be interesting to know where exactly he was supposed to fall in the draft, but he is a big body, like nose tackle ish type of player, and you do need in a run stuffing defense, you need a nose tackle that has size because you want him to command double teams. And if he's able to get the guard center combination, that obviously gives everybody else their one-on-ones. And if you have Calais Campbell, Robert Robinson, who's looking phenomenal, and you give your outside linebackers like Sweat and whoever else is going to be lined up opposite side of him, you give them their one-on-ones. That's the whole idea of like why you want that big run stuffing nose tackle to be that guy up the middle. And if Elijah Simmons is showing like somewhat of like dominance during like training camp, obviously you got to take everything with a grain of salt with training camp and whatnot, because some players will look dominant and then the season rolls around and you just don't hear about them anymore. That's a good find for the Cardinals. So I'm very excited about him, but I'm gonna go ahead and just like wait to see how he is during the preseason, because I imagine he's gonna get a lot of preseason snaps.
Yes, that's something I think I'm very much looking forward to. This is one of those places where guys who are on the edge of the roster, and what we've seen with Arizona is this isn't the 2023 Cardinals where you're just trotting out guys to make do. This is something where you have a pretty set roster. You've signed the veterans, you've even drafted a bunch of defensive players. That's where you're going to have to be able to make some additional plays, at least, to be able to show that you've got not just potential to stick around in the league, but if called upon, as we know with the league, injuries happen at any point. I mean, the Cardinals went out and signed a whole bunch of players, at least, to try to be able to address nose tackle in Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones. Neither of those guys ended up playing the majority of snaps at nose tackle. So you ended up with a situation where one of your draft picks, Dante Stills, who had played a bunch as a rookie, also had to play a bunch after that. So that's something that I think when it talks about how you develop, how you're able to move in the league, it comes down to reps are the best way that you learn. And there's not a lot of reps to be able to be had for these guys outside of camp and preseason games. You've got to maximize those reps. As far as let's kind of talk a little bit about what else as far as positives, other things that we've been seeing. There's been some praise, obviously, for Trey Benson. I do think he takes a step forward this year. Trey McBride, of course, does look the part of being probably the best player on the offensive side of the ball for the Arizona Cardinals, only by the manner of age. Otherwise, he'd be talking about James Conner. Let's talk a little bit, at least, about some of the guys who need to be able to show up, be able to show out with being able to make the roster. And one of those guys that I think that we haven't talked as much about is going to be Christian Jones. We mentioned him slightly last week. But with Christian Jones, he's one of the players who, as a fifth round pick, had athleticism, built a little bit different from one of your Paris Johnsons. Um, he's one of those guys who is facing some competition from Josh Fryer, a undrafted free agent who was the right tackle. I don't believe he played at the exact same time. There's a little bit of overlap maybe with Paris Johnson. But Christian Jones right now, he is the backup right tackle to Jonah Williams. Fryer's the guy at least who is competing with him. But Kelvin Beachum is in possibly the last year of his NFL career. So you're talking about Christian Jones. He's either going to cement himself as, hey, this is going to be a swing tackle of the future. If he's not able to be able to cut it and Josh Fryer outplays him, you're probably going to be looking at a difficult decision to have to make with the draft pick. But Fryer is a guy who developed under the current offensive line coach that the Cardinals have. He's a guy, at least, that is familiar with how they're going to be running and coaching the team. That's one of those guys, at least, that we're going to need to see him step up, especially in the preseason. Defenses and pass rushers, because of the way it goes, they always have the advantage in preseason games because teams aren't schemed as far as how we're going to handle these blocks, how play calls are done. That's going to be one of those guys, at least, I think that we need to keep a close eye on, because if he isn't able to cut it and Fryer is able to step up, because you already have a Kelvin Beachum who's cemented that swing tackle role, who could replace either guy, you want to find out, is this the guy for the future, or are you going to move forward with maybe a more known quantity guy who this offensive line coach is comfortable with? That's one of the guys on offense, I think, who's going to need to make a push. Are there any other guys on the offensive side of the ball that you see, Marcos, that really may need to make a push to stay on this roster?
Well, I mentioned earlier about Greg Dortch. He's going to make the roster, but he's on this position where he might lose his starter snaps, or at least the majority of the
Hmm.
snaps in that position. So he, like, Greg Dortch is one of those people, he might be pushed down. He's not going to get released. Obviously, we're not going to release someone like Greg Dortch. He's going to be the punt returner at that point. But his impact on offense is looking like is becoming more replaceable with somebody like Zay Jones, who came over last year. He was obviously he wasn't able to play the first six, I believe, the first 6 or 8 games because of a suspension.
Hmm.
So obviously, in that situation, Greg Dortch is going to get a lot of the starter snaps and whatnot. But as he was the starter, they have him run pretty much like China, choice routes. They have him play a lot over the middle, and it's hard for us to like continuously just target that over the middle part of the field. With Zay Jones, you can run more skinny posts. You couldn't do that with Greg Dortch. Greg Dortch can run a post, but how many times have we seen him get targeted on a post route or on a go route? And this really hasn't been much. Yeah, I mean, you have to be a burner to be at that size and have some success to be able to run those routes. But if you're not a burner, if you're somebody who's around the 4.4s or even the high 4.3s, with the cornerbacks that we have, with the safeties playing way off the line of scrimmage, if you don't have that size to be able to complement like that speed, it's going to be hard for him to get those targets. So it could be an idea where they're wanting to do a lot of 3 trip sets and line up Zay Jones as a number 3, of course, and have him run skinny post, because against cover 3, that means he's facing a linebacker. Obviously, you want that mismatch more often than not, and it's easier for Kyler Murray to throw that skinny post. Person I see also making a push is Evan Weaver, the other wide receiver, of course. He's coming on as if he's the Greg Dortch of 5 years ago or 4 years ago. You know, just really talented. The fans don't want to let him go. They want to keep him on the roster. They're afraid that if we release him, he won't make this practice squad. So he's playing up himself into becoming one of the players that might not be cut. Of course, we just don't know what the coaching staff is thinking.
That's right. Yep. No, that's something I'm very, very curious about, at least with seeing just how things pop up with it is, as far as for some comments, at least from some people on a YouTube show, thanks to Dana R, talking about at least with Darren Hall, PJ Mustafer. He also mentioned at least about with the physical profile of Zay Jones. Uh, hey, with Zay being a taller receiver, he is able to be on the same field in 3 receiver sets. What we think then is this would be kind of your 11 personnel. You're going to have your 3 wide receivers and Trey McBride. You can then also throw the ball to your receiving back, which could be any of the Cardinals backs with how they've been split up. James Conner, we know, has caught a lot of balls last year. That's something at least where if the Cardinals are able to spend a lot of time in 12 personnel but can adjust to 11 personnel and still be effective, that can take advantage of mismatches. If you're going to be looking at a team that maybe is going to have a weaker cornerback spot, so instead of just having to run the football, you can then design plays to get a guy who's maybe not played in the NFL before against a Marvin Harrison Jr. That's something I think that is definitely important. One of the things, at least, that we can talk about with Jones or Fryer is when we talk about Christian Jones and Josh Fryer. As Dana said, at least, what's the advantage of Beecham? Josh Fryer has only ever played at right tackle from what we have looked at. He started all 16 games for Ohio State last year, played right tackle in college, and then played right tackle, I believe, at Indiana before he transferred over. I believe it was... Actually, no, he was a Ohio State program for 5 years. I believe it was Christian Jones, the guy who was at Texas, played a few games at left tackle. 1 game at left tackle, I think it was, in his collegiate career. The way that this at least stacks up is pretty easy. We've talked about this before. If you don't have a right tackle of the future that's on the roster, very possible that is the Cardinals' first round draft pick, who may start then as a rookie in 2026. Assuming that all things go according to plan, such as Kyler Murray has a great season, you're looking at him as sticking with him for maybe not another year, but potentially what does another deal extension look like? These are all areas that I think could be very interesting. Now, one guy that I could see potentially being a red shirt that doesn't play as much as maybe we would have expected is Hayden Connor, the draft pick in the 6th round. He looks like he's got some strength that he's needed. He's struggled in some of the defensive line drills against the likes of Elijah Simmons and others. It's one of those places where when you take a guy on day 3, as we've seen with Monty Austin-Fort, sometimes those guys are not ready to go right away. If they do like a guy and they think he's good enough to go as a rookie, we've seen they will take him on as early as day 2. We saw that with Isaiah Adams. We also saw when they signed Halte Froholt, we always thought, is there going to be another guy who comes in? They said, nope, we're confident he's going to be our starter for the year. They do trust their evaluation process. Having Royce Newman, who's also played games before, we've seen John Gaines be able to swap around back and forth. I think it's pretty clear that things are just set on the offensive line, with the possibility of adding a Will Hernandez in the future should an injury occur to the likes of maybe an Evan Brown or Isaiah Adams. That's really where we're at. We'll talk a bit about Kyler Murray at the end of our show today, because normally we always lead off with the quarterback. We'll talk about some of that at the end. Let's talk a little bit about the defensive side. 2 injuries that stand out. One being Bilal Nichols, still not close to practicing. I think, Marcos, that this may be a wash for him because of the neck injury that he suffered. He's still not even close to being cleared. He does have guarantees in his contract where it doesn't make sense for him to retire. I think this was talked about on one of the other podcasts, the Rise Up See Red podcast, where if you're a player who's going to retire, you give up so much amount of money that's going to be guaranteed. If you're healthy enough to play, but you know physically you're not there, that's one of those places, at least, where there's guys that we do see will say, hey, money's not worth it. My health is more important. He's not even healthy enough yet to be able to go in. This is something where I think we have to look at Bilal Nichols and say he's probably going to end up on the IR list, because if that money's guaranteed, you put him in IR to start, he's going to be out for the whole season. The hope is that you can get something out of him. At least we'll see if he's able to recover in time. BJ Ojolari also has been progressing, but isn't there quite yet. We'll see at least how that works. The one other factor with Walter Nolan that we can talk about is it's very similar to Darius Robinson last year. Robinson had an injury that we thought was possibly going to knock him out for the whole season. He came back, but wasn't the same. And his mother also passed away, which made things incredibly difficult for his rookie year. It may be that we get a bit more from Walter Nolan than we did from Darius in year 1, But with him being out for camp up until the start of the season, you're probably going to need a little bit of time to acclimate. I think we're probably not going to even talk about Walter Nolan until the first 6 games of the season are already being played, which is disappointing in a way. But when you talk about rookies, you look at Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson, Darius. The Cardinals paid guaranteed money to LJ Collier. They expect him to play a role. And then you also want to make sure that you're getting guys like Dante Stills and Elijah Simmons onto the field. This is a spot where maybe disappointing, but the Cardinals didn't draft Walter Nolan to be that impact first round guy immediately. They drafted him recognizing they've got Calais Campbell in his final season. Dalvin Tomlinson, I believe, is 33, 34. You haven't seen anything yet from Darius Robinson. This is where I think ultimately you're talking about it may be a disappointment for one level, but I think we can make up with that disappointment with a couple of the other players we're going to talk about here in the second on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that we have no timeline when it comes to Walter Nolan. He has a similar this is kind of what freaks people out when you tell him like he has a similar injury to like Robinson, because they think to themselves like, oh well, it's going to be another timeline like that. They completely forget that you have to face a tragedy, and that is kind of
Yeah.
one of the things that added on to it. And I'm not sure if he was set to return by game 6 or game 7, but I do know that he was set to return sooner rather than later. And unfortunately, that's the circumstance happened where you're not going to ask a guy to come back after a tragedy happens. So we could be seeing somewhat of a different timeline with Walter Nolan being that he might play sooner. He did tweet something about like be right back or BRB. Uh, Basically trying to tell, the fan base, hey, I'll be right back. And it could be a situation where he might be coming back maybe on the last game of preseason, maybe game 1, or maybe like 4 games into the season. It's not going to be similar with the type of injury that he sustained, and different people have different recovery methods, and we could just be uh, freaking ourselves out for no reason. Especially that Darius Robinson is on his he had a redshirt year last year. He's looking really dominant this year. He hasn't had the experience now. He's getting the experience of going up against offensive linemen. Last year he did as well, but it was kind of like a lost season, you can say, like a redshirt season. And this is his first true season. Uh, God forbid any injury happening. So that's where I'm standing on these injuries. BJ Ojolari, I'm starting to lose my patience with him. I mentioned it last time. The fact that BJ's still not on the field, or even we're not even getting any type of like timeline with him, and it just seems like another one of those situations where we draft a player that's high rated and they're just not on the field enough. I think we did that in 2019 with the wide receiver that we drafted, and he never hit the field, and by the next year he got released. I don't think BJ is gonna get released, but like the timeline is just not clear. We have no idea if he's even going to come back. They had some sort of dispute before he even got signed by the Cardinals last year, and he kind of did a little mini holdout. And it's past that time. I mean, come on, like BJ might even become a situation. It might even become a situation where he gets put together in a trade package that we might or might not do. Who knows if we're gonna do it or not.
They've moved as though BJ Ojolari isn't part of their plans, and if you do get anything from him, it's a bonus. Now, I do think when we look at second round picks the last few years, we had a couple of holdouts this year. Will Johnson was one of the last second round picks to sign. I think a lot of that's been more the CBA, whereas second round picks didn't get fully guaranteed deals like the first round picks did. Eventually, they kind of came out, all right, they're about 90% guaranteed deals. So that's one of the areas that we can, talk about more when it comes to is part of BJ Ojolari's thing. Cardinals drafted a second rounder who was hurt in BJ Ojolari. He showed some flashes, maybe not to be a Batman sort of pass rusher, but maybe the Robin on the other side. And like we said, he just has not been as healthy. Azeez Ojolari, at least, has also battled with some injury issues this year. Just one of those cases, at least, where when you're talking about how the Cardinals have addressed the defensive line, They've also addressed it with the edge rusher room as well. And one of the things we can talk about here with some of the players, Xavier Thomas at least has grown a little bit. We haven't seen the same athleticism as we would have hoped, but we have ultimately, I think, seen um, him just in his technical abilities. Remember, he was a former top recruit out of high school who just was never able to stay healthy on the field. When it comes to the defensive side, let's talk about some of the different standouts before we focus on one in particular. And that would be Cody Simon and Denzel Burke. We've talked already about Elijah Simmons showing up. Cody Simon has been getting some first team reps. That's something that I think cannot be overstated because the Cardinals have needs at inside linebacker. We know that Owen Papo seems to have one of those spots on lockdown this year. He'll probably get the first shot. Athletic freak, 5th round draft pick. We talked at the time that this is very similar to how Kaiser White came into Jonathan Gannon before he got paid. Kaiser has gone to the Lions as of now, and Cody Simon is kind of seeming like he's come in to be one of those guys who has the mental aspect of the game down if Owen Papo is going to be the athletic type. We've also seen a couple of interesting things. Akeem Davis Gaither has played first team reps in that spot. Mac Wilson seems to be entrenched as a starter. Seems like they're taking Mac Wilson. This is kind of what we wondered a year ago. Mac Wilson coming in, getting some rush off of the edge. Kaiser White was blitzing a lot up the middle and off of the edge last year where the team just didn't have that edge presence. Mac seems to be the guy who's going to step up and replace Kaiser as the Mike. The other name that's been most interesting with all of this is Zaven Collins because he's been getting some run at inside linebacker. I know a lot of Cardinals fans have argued back and forth, is he an edge, an inside linebacker? How does that flexibility work? What we've seen is on the edge, fantastic run stuffer. We have not seen the pass rush ability in terms of being a natural pass rusher, but he's a guy who can get you 7 sacks a year, either from some of the hard rushing ability, coverage sacks, just being able to at least make use of being able to shed some of those blocks. It's kind of an interesting spot where between him, Simon, Walker, there's room at least ultimately for someone to be able to step up and get those snaps. I don't know if they will rotate the way that we've seen, but it is interesting that Cody Simon, for a 5th round pick, or I think 4th round pick, excuse me, he's already shown that he's probably going to make the roster. This, I think, with the additional front 7 guys that the Cardinals have, it may not be that they have a star at the inside linebacker spot, but we've seen with Jonathan Gannon, they don't necessarily need a star. They will scheme guys into their position. What you need is a strong defensive line up front and a really strong secondary. I think that's one of the cases that you can make where the Cardinals have enough guys now at the position that you can say, yeah, they didn't need to bring a Kaiser White back. We just need to see who's going to seize those starting spots next to a Mac Wilson and a Owen Papo, because how that rotates is going to be very interesting come regular season.
One of the issues that I have with this rotation is that we don't have a clear cut coverage linebacker, and it's important to have that as our one of our linebackers to become one of the coverage guys, or at least in a situation where you can drop both of them to cover. They do have a lot of like blitz packages where they do send like one and then the other one drops back, or they would send both, or they drop both of them to hook defenders. And my issue with it is that if you don't have a coverage linebacker, you kind of give yourself a like kind of like a tell to the offense. So you're thinking to yourself, and this is something that was like echoed by I think it was Brett Coleman who brought it up as well. He said like, who are you going to blitz if you have Cody Simon and Mac Wilson, and who are you going to drop into coverage? And it takes 1 second to think. You're like, you're going to blitz Cody Simon because you don't want him in coverage. Same thing goes for Owen Papo. He's not known to be. Those two guys got somewhat of a similar profile, with Owen Papo being more athletic. They're both like great going forward, but not good going back. And instead of getting somebody to be able to play that role where they're good coverage linebackers, where you're thinking to yourself, he's not going to give up a 7-yard like pass to like a running back running a choice route, or like a small like like a Greg Dortch and whatnot. They're not going to be either giving them up as often, or they're going to be the hook defenders who are smart enough to know when to break on a ball. And you have that with any of these linebackers. Mac Wilson's the best one, but Mac Wilson, you also want him to blitz, and his coverage ability like especially last year, like it was covered up by the fact that he was more of a blitzer. So we don't really know what he can offer in that. My issue is that their best coverage linebacker that has shown best to be able to have handle his coverage abilities is playing outside linebacker in Zaven Collins. Now Zaven Collins is not Fred Warner coverage. He's not nowhere near the top guys in the league. He does have size to be able to complement his ability to cover more grass, and he does have that strength in his legs to shift left and right. I believe better he had better like a three cone time than some of the running backs. A running back that we drafted that same year, and it was kind of like astonishing to know that like a linebacker can even move that fast and that great. That's what made him so like sought after, which is why the Cardinals took him in the first round, because he was a guy that can move kind of. I'm not sure if it was you who made that comparison, but you said he was like Derrick Henry out on defense or whatnot when he was drafted.
Yeah.
So just think about that big oversized guy that shouldn't be moving the way he should, and he is. If you continue to play him at the outside linebacker position, you're going to get what you're going to get. You're going to get 4 sacks a season. You're going to get good run stuffing ability, but he makes so much more of an impact if he's in the middle of the field on a run play to be able to be that run stuffer, because no one's going to run him over. He's 270 pounds. Running back's not going to put his shoulder down and run him over. So that's my qualm with it. Other than that, I just think that it's going to be Mac Wilson. He's the guy. That's it. The other position, it's almost a toss up.
Yeah, I think what we could see is some rotations where Mac Wilson rushes off the edge previously, but also like when you brought up as far as athleticism, I think one of the things, and this is we can talk about the way the Cardinals will scheme. The way that they're going to use their outside linebackers this year and their safeties, I think, is also going to make up for some of that coverage. So, like a good example
point.
is let's take a look at with some of the athleticism. This is pulling up the mock draftable chart. When Zaven came out, size, weight, wingspan, arm length, freak. This is part of why he's so good at blocking and shedding, is because he's got the size, the ability. He's not going to be a smaller, lighter guy. And with that arm length, he's able to shed pretty well from whether it's tackles or other guards that you have. It's one of the reasons why, when he came out, people went, all right, well, he's a guy that has athleticism and coverage. He also, at least as far as what those instincts, we didn't see those develop as much in year one. The question now, of course, is going to be when they put him on the outside linebacker spot, can they have him adjust into the mic? One of the things that I think we could see also is it may not be the middle linebacker who drops back into coverage, because having a guy like a Baron Browning, who did have a lot of those physical freak abilities at the inside linebacker spot, like he's fast, quick, has a lot of the different bend, but has that ability to drop back in coverage. We've also seen, at least with a Josh Sweat, with his athleticism, that's one of the things, at least with him coming out, that we could also say was when you talk about guys and with athleticism, with Owen Papo, there's going to be some guys like Papo's been more of a heat-seeking missile. When you talk about how Browning and some of the other guys have been able to be 3-down linebackers, part of why Sweat was a 3-down linebacker is he was able to, if need be, drop back into coverage. You don't want to take one of those guys who's your sack leader and drop him back that much, but when you take a look at least at the top guys overall who are height, weight, speed freaks, those are the guys who you can trust in coverage because they can drop back on a tight end and be able to hold their own. The other thing we can look at, of course, at least, is how Jonathan Gannon has talked about the safety. So Jonathan Gannon, according to Theo Mackey, said that they've shown a lot of 3 safety looks. That would be you're then maybe not having an extra linebacker on the field. You're going to have your 2 corners on the outside, but you have a 3rd safety in place of the linebacker. He's talked about, hey, this is about getting Dadrian Taylor Demison, aka Rabbit, on the field because he's a guy who can take away the ball. We've seen how he's tenacious against the run. We kind of compared him and said he's going to be kind of a mix of between, maybe not the same aggressive hitter as Budda Baker, but he's not going to be and he's going to have the sort of instincts that you see in a Jalen Thompson as well. He kind of fits in between those guys. The sky is the limit for him. Now, one of the things I mentioned with this, of course, is that Garrett Williams, he's probably, from what we said, Jonathan Gannon said this year, you're going to see him in more outside corner looks. Last year, he played slot the majority of the time. The Cardinals didn't go outside of nickel very much. They really liked being able to rotate guys on the back end and have Garrett Williams, at times even, he dropped into the deep safety spot. Budda Baker fired at least up the middle to be able to be there in run support. What we think at least about this is that they've got some unique skill sets. And he said deploying them how Nick deploys, you can create some matchup problems for the offense. I think this also is a place of, like you said, if you don't feel like you've got the best coverage, Mike linebackers, or the way your scheme looks, is you say, hey, we've got our defensive linemen. We're going to blitz some more guys up the middle to make sure that, hey, like, even if we can't get pressure with four, or if we're bringing in guys to stop the run, force teams into these third and long situations, one of the best ways that you can adjust and not having the best coverage linebacker is taking one of those safeties, putting him into one of those spots. And if you're going to talk about safeties who are going to be solid in run support, Jalen Thompson and Buda Baker and Adrian Taylor Demison jump up to the top of that amongst NFL depth charts. I think that this is probably what we're seeing for the most part, is that this is why the Cardinals are able to draft so many cornerbacks, why they've invested so much in the defensive line. It's because you can say, hey, we don't have a star linebacker. That's fine. We've got a bunch of studs up front we can rotate through, and we've got some real big studs on the back end. I think that we're going to see a lot of plays this year from the Cardinals being able to take one of their strengths, which is the secondary, and making it play out with a lot of these new different formations, at least, and rotations on the back end.
Yeah, so that's a good point when it comes to like these three safety sets. I think they're trying to experiment with something different, like a small ball lineup that does have a lot of speed and whatnot. So that would be a good solution to basically fix the other linebacker position. One that you can't trust in coverage just yet. Just go ahead and throw another safety out there. And I think they try to experiment this with Isaiah Simmons when they first had him, and of course they just went ahead and shipped him off. But they were trying to have Simmons out there as a safety, Jalen, and of course Buda Baker, and that didn't work out. They went back to like two linebacker sets, and I think they really want to get into that type of formation. So now the new person is going to be DTD. It's going to be Dadrian, Jalen, and Buda Baker taking those spots. You're going to put one in the box, obviously. You're going to have those other two, and you're going to have one in the box to hopefully be in coverage on tight ends, on running backs, and on slot receivers. And I mean, they'll do a better job than what we have right now at opposite of that other linebacker position. Unless, of course, they decide, you know what, we're going to move Saban back to that position, which I don't think they are. Uh, those are the sets that I think they're going to be more heavily. I believe that's what, like dime personnel,
Yeah.
six
They
defensive
played a
backs out there.
lot of quarters last year, which is part of what we talked about, which is you get to keep Garrett Williams on the field when you play more of that in nickel. We saw that they were able to essentially utilize mixing up those safeties to keep Buda Baker in on run support, because Buda's so good of being able to diagnose the run, fires like a heat-seeking missile. Those are all areas, at least, where you can see the coaching staff will uh, kind of put guys in position to succeed. What we saw the struggle was for Arizona was because they were so reliant on Buda Baker, and a lot of times that even when they were able to make plays against the run, teams would still be able to kind of run the ball on them, and then it would come down to, can you keep teams out of the end zone, hold to a field goal? When it came to the pass rush itself, this is where the Cardinals were fine against the run, but they were not able to get to the quarterback. They were able to, through design, through blitzes, that's how they did last year. But the lack of edge rush became very apparent. Like, they were relying on BJ Ojolari. He missed the season. They were relying on Darius Robinson. He essentially missed the season. Uh, they were able to somehow make it work at nose tackle despite all of those injuries, but it was really a unique situation where the Cardinals just had a lot more injuries than normal. They did not have the depth and were able to somehow make it work. But late in the season, the game that stands out to me is, of course, the Panthers game. Cardinals lost James Conner. Trey Benson was already out. They didn't have Michael Carter available to be able to kind of pull in from the practice squad against the Panthers. And that defense just got run on for just hundreds of yards. That long touchdown at the end of the game, of course, that was ran, was kind of the icing in the cake that really just showed that they just were not able to. They were able to bend for most of the season, and then ultimately they broke when they kind of just lost enough bodies on the line, on the front seven. Let's go and talk a little bit about some guys who we think will not make the roster or are in danger on the defensive side. We talked about Denzel Burke stepping up a bit, where it seems like he's made enough plays that, with the injuries at corner, you also have an injury of Quez Watkins out for the year, the former Philadelphia Eagle. The way Zay Weaver has looked, He's looked good enough that as far as deep threats go, that would have been Quez Watkins' spot. He probably wasn't going to make the roster anyway. This will allow them to keep him on injured reserve, make sure he gets paid, potentially be a guy you could bring back as a vested veteran for camp next year. One of the guys that's looked really well in Keaton Crawford, he's looked like he's flashed enough in the gunner role. Kind of, you think of that Justin Bethel special teams player. He's probably going to be the fifth safety that you could see on the roster if they're using three safeties, because Joey Blunt has played well enough as a special teams ace. It's really hard to see them giving up on a 7th-round draft pick with that athletic ability and taking a veteran like Blunt. And, maybe things change, maybe injuries happen, but we'll see at least how that works. What really it's shown, though, is that the 3rd-round pick, Elijah Jones, he's one of those guys that right now, I don't think that he's on the 53-man roster, Marcos. He's been outplayed a bit by Denzel Burke, the rookie draft pick. We've also seen that Keitrell Clark is a guy they trust in the slot. With Sean Murphy-Bunting and Starling Thomas both hurt, we talked about this opens up a spot for Keitrell Clark to be able to potentially make the roster, even with some of the other guys who are here. Jalen Jones, the undrafted free agent that who's in Chicago, has some playing time. This all, of course, is only popping up and showing because of one specific reason, as far as questioning why they're not going to keep that many corners. And the reason why ultimately is because the talk of camp this far, rookie cornerback Will Johnson seems like he's got a starting spot on lock, and we've just seen play after play made in camp. This one being on the likes of TJ Palmer. As far as when you talk about running a route for him, impressive. You can say, hey, it's TJ Palmer. Still, that quickness, the change of direction, reading the player, and being able to make the play. This is what you see in a cornerback one. And Marcos, this is part of where we've kind of waited most of the podcast to talk about it, but it's time we go into it. Will Johnson looks every bit the part that Cardinals fans have hoped that he would be this far in camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I love how he goes ahead and dissects this route now. I have a question about like this coaching staff, and I know I'm not gonna get an answer on it, but I want to talk to him about like, hey, do these guys know pre snap what is gonna be ran out there? Because if that's true, then obviously you're kind of cheating on that. I don't think that's the case, because we've seen a couple other corners get burned in training camp by these other receivers, and everybody's taking their lumps. From Will Johnson to Keitrell to I'm not sure if Star Thomas got a couple of snaps in there. I don't think he got any snaps, so we can't really speak about it. Even Garrett Williams has taken some of these lumps. But when you get somebody to be able to make a play on defense, it's actually very, very impressive. Thinking that on a wide open field, you're one-on-one with your wide receiver. Those are designed to almost like accentuate how like the receivers are dominant. Now that's different in an actual defense, but when you're one-on-one out there, it's hard to be able to like try to figure out what kind of routes being played. So for him to be able to jump this route, he stays even with this wide receiver, breaks on the ball almost immediately. Do you see how his hips shift over? Yep. They turn a full
Sinks
180 degrees.
Yeah.
And he drops his weight, does it like very like fluent, like very seamlessly, and then already breaks over to be able to defend that ball. That's how you got that interception as well.
Yeah, exactly. This is one of those routes where we can talk about this as both a plus to Will Johnson. Also, you can have it as a critique of TJ Palmer, like 7th-round pick. We talk about the height, weight, and speed that's there, but look at how long it takes him to actually flip his hips, turn around, and then come back to the ball on the route. It just, by the time that he actually gets it here, you see how there's that hesitation before he actually starts moving back to the ball. So he gets to the top of the route, he stops, turns around. You want to be able to at least have that spot where you're turning around, coming back as quick as possible for the most part. Right here, you see there's a little bit of a slide and a slip at least for that one. He's still able to kind of make his move and come back. Will Johnson already has his hips flipped at that point. So like you said, even if it is a spot where you're talking about like if he's going to be able to anticipate like the route with how that's going to be coming back, it's one of those places at least where you can see it just takes a little bit too long. You got to stick your foot in the ground, turn, and then start coming back to the ball right here. He still takes a little bit of time and has a lot more of just the turning ability. It's just there's more height, there's more weight, there's more that has to be able to turn around, and so it's the explosiveness needs to be there. As Dana is at least kind of pointing out in her comments, eyes at least are on the receiver's hips. You're mirroring that guy at least, but yeah, you can see he can tell where he's turning his hips. TJ Palmer just doesn't have his ability to turn his hips as quick as possible. Even with the likes at least of a Trey McBride, that's one of those things where McBride is just so good at being able to plant the foot in the ground and turn. That's how you're able to get separation in the NFL. And with Will Johnson, he's able to take advantage of being able to see that separation and make a close and make a play on the ball. Let's go ahead here and take a look here at one of the other plays that we can talk about from, I think actually it's the same play from a different angle. If you want to take a look here against TJ Palmer, this is one that I liked this angle actually a little bit more because it got to show you a little bit of the spacing. So here we've got, there's a couple of different plays at least. So this is one of the plays with Marv where you're able to see at least just some of the tenacity. This is the interception, at least on Jones. This is the play that we just saw, at least from the hip flipping and then being able to get the tip pass drill. Here's the one. Let me go back, sorry, to the beginning, folks, here. Here's the one that we have, at least with Weaver going up here with how he mirrors the hips. He slows down, watches the hips, is able to make the play. This is a great angle because you see it's not that he's we talk about staying in the receiver's hip pocket. He kind of is for the most part, but he's actually got the recovery speed. So he's not completely straight there. He's looking right now at seeing where the direction changes. He immediately sees where the head's going to snap. So this is where he knows immediately this is where it's going to shift. Look how quick he's able to just suddenly come up, recognizes the route concept, is watching which way the hips go, if it's going to be a double move or coming back. And then, of course, he just immediately turns around, snaps the head around, looks for the ball. When the Cardinals drafted Brandon Williams, he was one of those guys who made tons of plays in camp. It seemed like he was going to be a starting cornerback. When it came to the game itself, he just didn't have the awareness of when the ball was in the air. We're able to see him. He didn't get his head around. There's times where he gets caught by a play behind. He's then having to try to make a play where he doesn't have his head around on the ball. This is where you can see the natural cornerback being able to actually keep his eyes, knowing at least the right time to flip his head back around. And he doesn't even just stop there. He makes a play right on the ball there. Very well done, at least there on that play. Let's talk at least a little bit about with this interception here, just being able to have the recovery speed to make the play on the ball there on Kyler's out route here to Zay. Just steps in front of it, stretches the arms, does a great job there. Of course, we've already seen at least this play from multiple angles, but this is the one that I think we wanted to talk about a little bit, which is this is the play at least on, I believe, Michael Wilson that we're able to see that interception. He goes at least is able to kind of run him down into the ground, just being physical. This is the one that's the other pick that was the one at the end of the red-white practice. Steps in front, makes the play. That's just a different angle of that we've been able to see. It's been really encouraging, I think, for a lot of Cardinals fans because, like we said, this team probably didn't need a cornerback one. They signed Sean Murphy-Bunting for that. They probably could have made do without it. You got this guy at pick 47. That's one of those things where if you're talking about a potential top 10 talent that slides to you at the 47th pick, sky may be the limit for this Cardinals defense that can now trust this rookie on an island. You've got Garrett Williams, who's been a shutdown corner out of the slot on the other side. You play your three safeties now all over the place, knowing also you've got a Keitrell Clark. You've got even a Denzel Burke who can come in potentially to man the slot. This may be a really dominant sort of secondary, and that's kind of something we've hoped for as Cardinals fans. We haven't seen that since that no-fly zone years ago with the likes of Patrick Peterson, Antonio Cromartie, seeing Tony Jefferson rotate in as the other safety behind the Honey Badger. And not to even mention Deon Buchanan being kind of that big nickel and dime linebacker safety combo.
Sorry, I had to get to my unmute button and stuff. I was also trying to study more of like the the interception. It was on Zay Jones. I don't know if that's the one you were showing and whatnot. I was paying attention to where his eyes are at because it's true. And Dana, the ever very intelligent woman that she is, pointed out that on these situations, rookie corners will mess up by keeping their eyes kind of high instead of keeping their eyes on their feet. I mean, the
Yep.
hips don't lie. That's what they always say.
The head
They'll
head
tell you
shake. You could
whichever.
get guys all the time who'll just shake the head one way and then you go the other way. One of the best guys who could hold his head still where you could never see which way it was going was Larry Fitzgerald. Like Fitz would just run, kind of be able to bob. He would kind of look this way and then his body would go a different way. He would just be able to take advantage of inexperienced corners. And then against the top guys, he just wouldn't move his head, wouldn't let you know what he was thinking.
Yeah, and he was in a zone bail technique. That's what makes this even more impressive. He's about like 5 yards off the line of scrimmage, I believe, or like 7 yards off the line of scrimmage. He has that bail technique because right before the snap, he turns his hips towards like he puts his butt to the boundary and whatnot, and is kind of sidestepping when he knows that the ball's already been released and he knows that this route's going to be covered. Like in this situation, he's looking at the quarterback. He's not looking at the wide receiver.
Yep,
When he
that's zone
sees
for
and he
you. That's how
reads
you get
and
turnovers.
he reads like the release of the quarterback's arm, he immediately plants his left foot, turns his hips 180 degrees again, and then makes a break on that ball. That's a very underrated trait about cornerbacks is their ability to flip their hips on a dime, plant their foot, and then make breaks on balls. And it looks like this guy has it just like naturally, which is why he became such a shutdown corner for the Michigan Wolverines, and it's very impressive because this is so hard to teach cornerbacks, especially rookie cornerbacks. Doesn't matter where you take them in the draft, they do not get this little technique down. It'll be interesting to see how many interceptions he gets during the season and how many pass breakups because he's going to be thrown to by a lot of quarterbacks. They're going to test the young guy. They're going to be playing a lot of zone with our cornerbacks. He is the best pure cornerback of last year. And I say pure because we have a cornerback wide receiver that was taken second overall, he or third overall. I forgot where he went. But like when it came to pure like cornerback technique and whatnot, it was Will Johnson. Will Johnson for no for whatever reason, teams just were scared off of him. He's showing down in camp. I can't wait to see him in the preseason if they play him in the preseason, and I can't wait to follow this guy's career.
Absolutely. No, that's something that I'm very excited just to be able to see with Will Johnson on one side, knowing Garrett Williams will be on the other. That's going to be one of those incredible sort of tandems that you're able to get a first round talent in Garrett Williams in the third round due to injury. Will Johnson, also another first round talent who falls. We'll see exactly how things will play out at least, but it's one of those spots of where that's so far been the talk of camp has been that this Cardinals defense, the defensive line is much improved, the pass coverage is much improved, and a lot of it is being able to take a chance and take a risk at least on one of those guys that every Cardinals fan probably said they would have wanted, but like we had talked about Marcos, the thought was, well, you can't take him at pick number 16, and because of your needs, you're going to either be taking a defensive tackle or you're going to be taking a edge rusher, or you're going to be taking a right tackle because of just the value of the position and questions about, what does the future look like? Maybe that's the best talent that you'd find available. You can get a top 10 pick maybe who falls in a Josh Simmons who he's already starting at left tackle and playing consistently looks like a stud for the Kansas City Chiefs. At least there's a little bit of a draft what's it called I'll always at least be able to say as long as the what we see on the field matches what my preconceived takes were at least of a player, something I always look forward to. Let's go and wrap up at least here. We'll talk a little bit with Kyler Murray because I know there's some fans have questioned, like, are there picks that we're seeing in practice from him or stuff? Really, what we've seen for the most part is that if the defense is going to be improved, and we wanted the defense to improve, and if Kyler Murray is going to even have this sort of a caliber year that we want, a lot of it's going to come with him having to be able to run more, seeing guys like Marv improve. We should be able to at least see more of what the offense is going to be. It's also in camp, it's hard to be able to at least say, oh, yes, this is the case, this is not. Ultimately, you kind of wait for the season. This is one of those places, at least, where I think ultimately what we're going to find out about Kyler isn't really going to be the case until we get to that back half of the season. It's probably like one of the most important, I would say, 6 to 8 game stretches that a player can have in the NFL for their future, because everything about Kyler has led to this point of being able to have the Cardinals come out strong, win some games while the schedule's easy, knowing the back half is brutal. One of the questions that people have had, at least with Kyler Murray, and this is something even with one of those interceptions that kind of got pulled, the defensive line got in his face. He's a shorter quarterback. He threw a little bit off of his back foot. I think this is one of the guys that we've had before on our podcast, WBJ Mitch. He talked and was wondering, hey, like, is this like a preconceived thing? Do they throw it to him for all of this stuff? And my answer, at least, is it's zone coverage. Like, that's part of where Will's reading that for the most part to be able to make that play. Let me go ahead, for those watching on video, going to pull up the play here, at least that we got to see from the quarterback perspective. This is going to be the same play, but we'll get a good look at least at what Kyler's seeing from the pocket on that interception. So you can see here that there is at least number 10, Josh Sweat gets there. Kyler throws a little bit off the back foot. It's zone coverage. We already saw Will Johnson backing up and making that play. These are one of the throws that you can make this in training camp. You can't make this in a game. And that's one of the things, at least, where if we're talking about with Kyler Murray, he has the arm strength to throw from different platforms. You're never going to be able to have stuff throw perfectly in the NFL. These are the throws that you do want to get out of your way during training camp when it doesn't count, so you don't make it during the regular season. If we do start seeing stuff like this during the regular season, that again, Marcos, is what's going to cause some fans to worry, because as we've said, everything's built for this year, for Kyler to succeed, for the defense to step up. That's where the quarterback is going to have to be able to make these plays, or in other cases, take a sack, at least if you're going to have to live to fight another down. Training camp, you don't take sacks. Like, even if the guy is going to get pass rush in the backfield, quarterback knows he's not going to get hit, he's not going to get touched. Even with this play, at least, that's going to be there. You can tell Kyler still has the pocket that's there. He throws up the ball, goes to his outside target. Will Johnson, of course, makes him pay for it in that zone coverage look. That's one of those cases where, like as people have said, you're going to end up needing to see those decisions be able to be on, put, or tight, or throw the ball away if it's going to be needed to for Kyler Murray's sake.
Yeah, I think his vision was kind of compromised here, so that could be partially why he was throwing it off his back foot, thinking that he was going to get that out route and did not see the hang defender. That's something I tweeted about. I said Kyler Murray's still having issues seeing the hang defender, and it's pretty obvious as to the reason why is because his vision is only so you can only get so much between the tackles. It's like looking at a fence, like a white picket fence. You put your face onto it and then you move left and right, and that's exactly what Kyler Murray's vision is. It's having little windows to be able to see. You can't see hang defenders if they're hiding behind like offensive and defensive linemen battling each other. So when you see that wide open receiver make a break, he throws it, then he sees Will Johnson pop out of nowhere, gets that interception. It's the same case with Mac Wilson's interception, and I believe it was Jalen Thompson as well.
Yep.
It is a better defense. We have to give him that. The defense, as opposed to before, is 1,000 times better when it comes to coverage and when it comes to pass rush. So Kyler Murray has to get used to being able to release the ball in more compromised positions because he has actual pass rushers or people that can win up front to be able to cause more of a disruption. So that could be another reason as to why he's having these issues when it comes to like seeing what's going on. It could make him better though. It could, if he gets more reps like that, it could make him so that he learns more and he thinks to himself, all right, let's look pre-snap to see what kind of defense they're in. I didn't have to do it before. I have to do it now because I need to know where these underneath guys are. What are they playing in? Are they playing in bail technique? Is Will Johnson in man coverage a technique where his back's going to be towards me? Because if that's the case, I can complete that out route 10 out of 10 times because he's not able to see the ball. And then again, Will Johnson is Will Johnson. He's looked to be able to make a break on it anyway. But the whole point is he has a better chance of completing that ball. And if he's in bail technique in zone, and that's not tested.
Yep. It's like you said, that's part of where, when it comes down to, is Kyler Murray not just going to be the quarterback of the now? We've seen Cardinals didn't have any chance to be able to go and get better or to be able to upgrade. If they wanted to, you're probably going to be talking about having to then take a JJ McCarthy. You don't get a Marvin Harrison Jr. You're having to then essentially trade a Kyler Murray. Like, the way that things have been structured, if you want to be able to win games in the NFL, we've seen that Kyler is a quarterback you can win games with. The question is he a quarterback that you can win games because we've seen he's had to kind of carry a bit of the Cardinals in a lot of ways, and they've kind of gone up and have gone down as he has gone, from everything from seeing that he probably doesn't run as much as, like we said, that he probably should, but being a smaller quarterback, taking some of those hits, that's been a lot of questions that people have said is the height going to be a limit? Because as I've said, it's harder to tackle a guy who is going to be Kyler Murray's size with that quickness, who's even smaller, who's able just to scamper that you have to be able to keep track of. He can change directions on a dime. He can also just completely accelerate, outrun the rest of your defense. It makes it difficult to play him. When you're able to get that rush, get into his face at least, and he drifts back into the pocket, we've seen like he had times where he had to start eating it because he would just try to make a play, try to run, and then we had some times where we were able to see like he's able to escape, make this miraculous play. Other times we see he would take a 10-yard loss on second down, and suddenly you're throwing a screen pass on third down and punting it to the other team. It's one of those places, at least, where when you see the pros and cons, NFL defenses have gotten used to attacking Kyler Murray a certain way, and that's something that what we've seen that he has needed to be able to make different plays on. Now, one of the other things I do want to be able to at least point out, and this is one of the areas of progress with Kyler Murray, is we can talk about the second play here. So first is just going to be the physicality of Will Johnson that we're able to see. But with him being able to kind of just move around with Marvin. Again, like we said, the next play, Marv was able to kind of learn from it, pick himself up, and get past. I think there was even a flag thrown on the play just for being a little bit too physical there. Look at this second play here. Now, this is going to be something where Kyler takes the snap. You can see they fake it on the play action there. Across at least with James Conner, who goes out for the pass route. Look where this ball goes. He steps up in the pocket. He's got a rusher in his face, changes the arm angle, throws it over to Marvin Harrison Jr. on the over route. As we've seen last year, Marvin had the most routes of any NFL wide receiver on crossing routes. This is like a quick crosser right over the middle, able to get him a play. You back off the linebackers from some of the other plays, and you get Marv with yards after the catch, just splits through the defense and accelerates. This is one of those plays where I think it was Seth Cox in our text thread said, I don't know if I've ever seen this sort of a thing from Kyle. Maybe we've seen it once or twice to Hopkins, I think in the Chargers game in 2022, where Hopkins kind of caught the ball in one of those crossing routes over there. Him stepping up in the pocket, delivering a ball like this with a guy in his face. Look where the feet are, at least, of the guy in front of there. If Kyler's able to take that step forward from the pocket, and then we can see them utilize Marv like this over the middle, suddenly what's been kind of a black box in the middle of the field, over the middle for Kyler Murray, where it's been targeting to Marv on the outside, the big plays, or deep play action to kind of hit those guys over the middle. That's a huge step forward for the offense if he's able to make these sort of plays routinely now. That's one of those areas where, like, hey, for all like the questions or criticism we've seen, if they've changed up the playbook, Kyler's adapted to that playbook, and they're able to actually make this more of a three-dimensional offense, not a, hey, we're going to run the ball up the middle, we'll hit Trey McBride over the middle, we'll do some comebacks, slants, out routes to the outside, and then we'll take our deep shots from the pocket on these deep fade routes over to the sides, or we'll have to do a play action over the middle. This opens up the playbook for something we have not seen yet from Arizona, and goodness, if that's the case, that is a huge step forward for Kyler and for this offense.
That's there's actually two more of plays that have to do, because those were off on mesh routes. The other one's in Trey McBride. I believe it was versus the Jets. It was either that or versus the Chicago Bears. And at the end of the season against the 49ers, he threw a crosser over to Greg Dortch, and Greg Dortch, that's the
right, yeah.
the
Dortch
TD
has been the
inside.
king of that, but we always said, why don't throw that to Marv? Like, you can get that matchup that you're looking for. Like, you can be able to move guys around a bit, at least. If they're just going to be playing, man coverage, you can then be able to say, hey, we're moving Marvin over here from the guy who's, see if you follow him, give Kyler the read, at least to know if they're playing man there. If it's going to be zone, you see the guys adjust or move back. You're like, hey, cool. We just all of a sudden got a spot where Marv is going to get lined up now on potentially a linebacker or a safety over the middle. And like we saw in this last play, you had Mac Wilson as the linebacker on one side, Jalen Thompson the other. Marv just splits right through the middle and is able to actually get yards after the catch, something that we've said that was one of the critiques on him in college. You needed to see him be able to do more. We saw that happen when they gave Marv crossing routes against the Rams or even against, I think it was the Dolphins earlier in the season. We saw that yards after the catch ability. I think a lot of it came down to you may have to scheme some of those opportunities for Marv, because he's not going to be the same sort of quick twitch speedster who runs like, high 4.2s on a good day like Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr. He's going to be that guy that you can scheme in yards after catch and give some of those easier plays that allow to him to say like, hey, yeah, that's right. This is still a guy who's an Ohio State receiver that can run, low 4.4s, maybe high 4.3s on a good day, sort of game speed and practice speed and all track speed, all that stuff at least that comes up. We've been able to see the ability at least there from Marv. It's just been you need to be able to, like we said, give him some of these opportunities. Kyler being able to also step up in the pocket, make that play as well is a huge part of this.
Yeah, well, that's how he's gonna have to execute because he's gonna have a lot of these crossers, especially on mesh routes, to be called more often. So to be able to, he's ran this since he's been in high school, so he knows about mesh and he knows how to be able to execute with that. If he needs to step up into the pocket to do that, that's great because there was a big criticism of him in a video that was made by a YouTuber talking about how he wants to protect himself and he doesn't want to take those hits. If he sees something like that and the criticism is brought up to him, and now he's just saying, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and step up in the pocket for now, like this season. I'm gonna show everybody, prove them wrong. I'm a physical quarterback, and I put some weight on, like some muscle weight. I can handle the hits. If he
Mhm.
goes ahead and steps up in that department, there's gonna be a lot of yards that were left off the field that are suddenly gonna start showing up. It might even push him over 4,000 yards for the first time in his passing career.
No, I think that's something there. Like we've all said, I think the target for this year is going to be 1,200 yards. He may not pass up someone like Neighbors. We obviously know Trey McBride has to get his. They're going to get the ball to the likes of Zay Jones and Michael Wilson, especially since this, for all intents and purposes, it's almost a contract year for Michael Wilson. If he's not able to stay healthy and Cardinals are winning, there's a good chance I would say that they could just say, hey, there's this player wide receiver on an expiring or maybe 1 year left on his deal on a different team that's completely out of the playoffs. Let's swing a draft pick at least while we're going for it. Bring in that other receiver so that way when we are looking at the playoffs, we'll be able to have that other passing weapon to be able to compete. Speaking of other weapons, let's talk about two more. One, former Cardinal who gets signed, and one, a potential future Cardinal, according to some people. They really, really want to get him. Let's talk about the one that first that I think is the one that is more noteworthy, and that would be Micah Parsons. He's been working out with contract issues. He needs a new deal. Jerry Jones has not signed him. They've said the talks have broken down. He's apparently at practice today, but not dressed, saying, I don't want to be here. I don't want to have closed negotiations. I don't want to play for the Cowboys. I'm submitting my trade request. So some people immediately went, great, give up your first next year, give up a second round next year, maybe throw a player into the deal, at least if you're looking at that, to the Cowboys. Some people even said, hey, like if you want to get a Micah Parsons, throw them a Trey Benson and spend a year knowing that, hey, we may have to get another running back, but we've got our edge rusher that's ready to go for a year. And then for the long run. I don't think this happens. I think that this is one of those places where when you look at past times, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, they've all been able to at least make things happen, at least at the last minute. Clearly, they haven't had the same sort of holdouts for either of those guys that Micah Parsons has been threatening. I think at the end of the day, though, what we found out from Jerry Jones was he kind of negotiated with Micah and some other guys, but not necessarily his agents. He thought, hey, we came to a deal. Tried to get Micah to sign the deal. Micah did not sign said deal, and they've been far apart in contract negotiations. What I think is the case is you take a look at past history, and Jerry has always caved when it's come to these players. He's paid them. He's usually paid them for a higher price than he could have gotten if they signed them early because guys have signed. This is a TJ Watt has signed a deal. Trey Hendrickson's still looking for a deal. There's other guys who have signed deals. Micah Parsons is a guy that's going to get paid more because Jerry has dragged his heels on this. One way or the other, he's getting attention, but a lot of fans have wondered, hey, if you're the Cardinals, do you trade for a Micah Parsons? And for me, I think the answer is, well, yeah, if he's actually available, you go after it. I just don't think that he's actually available. I don't think that the Cowboys are going to trade him. I think this is going to be like a week leading up to the regular season. That deal gets done. He pays a little bit more because, as we've seen, teams will usually push or stretch or push things out, and eventually they'll end up paying the guys who are the capstone franchise players. And Parsons is like, the way to describe him is he's kind of like if you were able to take Hassan Reddick and all of the pass rushing ability that we've been able to see from him, plus some of the coverage skills, at least like of a Buda Baker. Like he can play inside linebacker at an all-pro level if he wanted to. One of the most valuable players with that athleticism. He still has sometimes he can get baited against the run because he wants to get those sacks. We've seen that against even the Cardinals themselves. Josh Dobbs had that long opening run against the Cowboys because they baited Micah Parsons inside, thinking he was about to get the cleanup play on the running back, and
Yeah.
that was the one where Josh Dobbs just tucked it, ran on the outside. Parsons did not maintain the edge because they were able to kind of bait him into just, hey, we've seen this play time and time again. No one's trusting that Josh Dobbs is going to tuck the ball and run for 40 yards. Like, nope, that's one of those places. I think, Marcos, it's a spot where if you can get it done, sure, but we say that about a lot of players. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like one of those areas of, hey, how much would you, wanted to give up for a Buda Baker versus Cardinals had Budo go through the same thing, requested a trade, wanted a new deal. Cardinals said, hey, yeah, well, we're not going to look at trading him. We want to sign him and lock him up. Teams wondered, could we trade for Budo Baker? Could we get this guy into our team? We need a safety. Ended up with the Cardinals, re-signed him and kept him. I think the same thing happens here with Parsons. Unfortunately, as fun as it would be for the Cardinals to add that kind of alpha pass rusher across from Josh Sweat and just have this insane sort of defense.
I mean, it would be my dream for them to make this type of a trade, but it is going to cost them quite a bit, especially since I don't think
Maybe
there's
two
going to be.
first. Yeah, maybe two.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the players are not going to be enough on their own. It is going to cost them at least 1, 2, even 2 first-round picks. Seen people put their packages together, and I would say if I was me, I would trade next year's first, and I would just try to package some players. But I don't think any player is going to be as valuable as replacing like Micah Parsons and his ability. So he's not going to be available, unfortunately, for the Cardinals. I mean, Monty can always prove us wrong. We could always see some sort of crazy alert from one of the ESPN guys saying like, oh, he just got traded to the Cardinals for this and this and that. But I don't think it's going to be the case. I think the Cowboys are going to keep him. I think this is going to be one of those moves like a Garrett a Garrett where he said he wasn't going to go back to the Browns and he is ultimately signed because the number was good enough. Jerry, I don't know what his thought process is, but he is not going to go lower than $41 million now. So because he pushed it off so far back, he is in a position where he can get assets for a outside linebacker, but you're giving up your main pass rusher who's all pro level, and good luck trying to replace him at that point.
Yeah. No, it's something, at least as far as with replaceable, that is something that's going to be really interesting to see. Now, speaking also of replacing, this is one of the areas that a lot of Cardinals fans question about because they kind of had to find the replacement in the draft a few years later. But former Cardinal Zach Allen made All Pro this year, had over a dozen sacks or so last year. We finally got to see him live up to that potential next to J.J. Watt in 2022. He didn't want to really stay through a rebuild. He got a nice deal from Denver. He's now been locked up to a brand new 4-year deal. This is one of those places where a lot of Cardinals fans wondered, hey, like, what if they had signed him? Like, you imagine how crazy the current defensive lineman would look. And I think it's something that we won't ever really get to know because Allen would have had to stay through a rebuild, and he may have then left in free agency this year and gotten signed to a different team just because of the way and the place where Arizona was. It is one of those spots that's really tough because, like, you take a look at some of the last draft picks that Steve Keim made. This is actually one of the first, I think, in the Cliff Kingsbury era. They took him in 2019. He had neck issues. He had injury things that popped up every once in a while. Finally started making plays, at least, and then became a almost star. Kind of got overshadowed by J.J. Watt, but then he went to Denver, played for Vance Joseph, and just has continued to grow into being kind of that interior penetrator who can line up at defensive end or even slot inside for a little bit. This is one of the spots where some Cardinals fans have questioned or wondered between him and Byron Murphy. And I think it's a sign of, like, it's not that Steve Keim and the evaluation was truly terrible or awful. It's that there is just a lot of the ways that the team didn't quite mesh everything together. And it's turned into, unfortunately, seeing a lot of what could have been as far as guys like a Zach Allen going on to become a highly paid, productive player, just not for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that 2019 draft had Byron Murphy and Zach Allen after Kyler Murray, and those three draft picks. You can say he actually hit on those, and we talk about how bad of a drafter that Steve Keim was, and there goes one of his former products getting an All-Pro big-time signing, and of course Byron Murphy leaving to go play for the Minnesota Vikings, leading the league in interceptions and becoming one of the premier corners of this generation, or I mean of as of late and whatnot. So those are two picks that I wish we could have retained. I was always mentioning that like during that time frame, if Monty Ossenfort wants to go forth with this rebuild, you do have to retain really good players, and unfortunately they didn't. Unfortunately, they wanted to go a different direction. They said because of culture reasons, they wanted to go ahead and purge as many players as they could, and those were Keim guys, and it sucks. It really does, and I don't like seeing Cardinals leave the organization and then become stars and whatnot. This is like the worst feeling you can get when it comes to like, hey, that guy was ours. He evidently had the talent and he had the potential, and he went ahead and showed it with another team.
Yep, absolutely. So, yeah, I agree with you in the fact that it's a frustration, but at the same time, it's one of those places of where the Broncos have had their own place, the Cardinals have had theirs, and I honestly am just glad that Zach Allen. We saw the flashes in Arizona. We finally saw the potential. We just, I think, would have seen probably a struggle over the last few years from 2023 and 2024. He was on a 3-year deal that was signed, so he probably would have had maybe 1 year left of free agency. But that was a guy that you had to spend a first round pick in Darius Robinson to replace him, and we're hoping that Darius will be able to show up on that cost controlled contract here. Let's go ahead and wrap up our podcast there. Next time, we're actually going to be having talking about the first preseason game. I believe that the Arizona Cardinals will be taking on. I think it's the Chiefs, of course, Saturday. That's going to be one of those games where we will see Mahomes play up against probably the Cardinals, some of their second teams guys. Andy Reid almost always plays his guys in the preseason. We'll see if they play more than one series. My guess is it's one single series. Maybe they just run the ball 3 times. It's usually the second preseason game that we'll see them leave guys out there for that first half. Cardinals will see Zach Allen and the Broncos the week after that, and then the final preseason game 3, which is for the final roster spots, will be August 23rd against the Raiders, and then our season is going to be starting up soon, Marco. So we'll come back after the first preseason game, review some of the guys at least who played well. We'll also probably see if we can get one more guest on. If we have another show this week, it'll depend, but 53-man roster predictions after preseason game 1 will be here. We will predict our 53, and we'll grade ourselves this year. See how many of those do we get right? How many do we get wrong? Will we get the A grade, or will we kind of fall into a C grade this year? It's going to be fun to go over. Marcos, if you can wrap us up today, tell our viewers and podcast listeners where they can find you and your content.
Well, they can find me at Pancake Soul on X, and of course, there's times where I did a solo stream, so you would find that at Redbird Reboot, the same YouTube channel that you see it. Prefer to have you on the YouTube side than on the X side. It's understandable though. If you want to look through the X side, that's completely fine. You can find Blake Murphy 7. Obviously, his Twitter handle is right there. You can find him there. You can find him at the Redbird Reboot YouTube channel as well. I believe we have the QR code up there. If you can't find it, just type in Redbird Reboot. That's basically it right there. So I hope we can get our subscriber base like a little bit higher this year. We do plan to be more consistent, more extensive when it comes to our coverage. And I mean, it'd be awesome to get you guys in the comment section.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much again for joining us. That'll wrap it up for us here on the Redbird Reboot podcast. Hey, we have actual Cardinals game. It's preseason, but it's still going to be a game that we get to talk about on this Saturday. Thank you guys again for listening in. We've just rebooted you guys. It's time for us now to, until next time, I should say, log off. Have a good afternoon, everyone.